This poor girl plays piano and grabs the attention of a millionaire, but something incredible happens next. Let me know what you think will happen in the comments. Your opinion is very important. Don't forget to subscribe to support my work. Your help is greatly appreciated. The sound of the piano echoed through Harmony Square, drawing the attention of tourists strolling along the cobblestone streets of the historic town of Harmony Falls. The small, nimble fingers of Lily, a girl of just 6 years old, danced across the keys of the old public piano with a naturalness that made passers-by stop and admire. Her blonde pigtails swayed gently as she concentrated on each note, her deep blue eyes fixed on the improvised sheet music she had drawn in a notebook. The little artist didn't even notice the admiring glances around her. She was completely immersed in her own composition, a melody she had created inspired by the stories she heard from the seniors her grandma June cared for at the local community center. It was a song that spoke of longing, love, and hope, even though Lily couldn't yet explain exactly how she managed to transform those feelings into musical notes. "Grandma, today Mrs. Gable told me about when she met her husband at the 4th of July picnic," Lily said later, while helping June organize the cornhusk dolls they sold to tourists. "I made a song thinking about her, about the moment they first danced together." June, a 68-year-old woman with gray hair always neatly tied, in a bun, tried to hide the worry in her eyes. "Lily, honey, you need to focus more on helping with the crafts. Music doesn't pay the bills." But before Lily could answer, a tall, well-dressed man stopped in front of the small makeshift stall. Theodore Bancroft, 58, had come to Harmony, seeking peace after a nervous breakdown that had made him question the last 30 years dedicated exclusively to business. His tired eyes scanned the crafts on display, but his attention was captured by the girl who was delicately arranging the corn husk flowers. "Was that you playing the piano in the square?" he asked, his deep voice carrying a tone of genuine curiosity. Lily just nodded shyly, hiding partially behind one of the craft pieces. June immediately placed herself between the stranger and her granddaughter, a protective reflex developed after years of raising the girl alone. "Sorry, sir, but we're already closing up," June said firmly, starting to gather the displayed pieces. Theodore took a step back, noticing the woman's suspicion. "Of course, forgive me. I just wanted to say that the music was beautiful." He left a few $100 bills discreetly on the table and walked away, disappearing among the tourists crowding the historic street. That night, as June prepared a simple dinner in her small house on the outskirts of town, Lily sat at the kitchen table, her feet swinging without reaching the floor. "Grandma, why don't you like it when I play the piano?" June stopped stirring the pot for a moment, her hands trembling slightly. "It's not that I don't like it, honey, it's just sometimes music can lead us down paths that hurt our hearts." Lily watched her grandmother with those deep eyes that seemed to see beyond words. "Is it because of Dad?" Silence weighed heavily in the small kitchen. June took a deep breath, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. "Time for a bath, young lady. Tomorrow we have to wake up early to visit Mrs. Gable." Meanwhile, in a luxurious inn in the historic center, Theodore couldn't sleep. The melody he had heard earlier in the square wouldn't leave his head, bringing back memories he had buried decades ago. He sat on the balcony of his room, watching the lights of the historic town when his cell phone rang. "Theodore, the investors are getting impatient." The voice of Sarah, his 38-year-old executive assistant, sounded tense on the other end of the line. "We need to finalize the purchase of the land by the end of the month. The resort project can't be delayed." "I told you I need time, Sarah," he replied, massaging his temples. "I still haven't decided about this project." "Decide? Theodore, you've worked 3 years on this resort. It's the biggest project of your career. What's happening to you?" He hung up the phone without answering, his thoughts returning to the little pianist in the square. There was something familiar in that music, something that reminded him of when he himself sat at the piano before life forced him to choose between art and survival. The next morning, Lily woke up early to help her grandmother with chores. As they walked to Mrs. Gable's house, the girl hummed softly, her eyes sparkling as she watched the sun rising behind the historic houses. "Grandma," Principal Thompson said there's going to be a new music program at school, she commented, jumping between the sidewalk stones. "She said I can participate." June stopped abruptly, her face paling. "Lily, we've talked about this. You're not going to participate in any music program." "But Grandma." "No buts. Music brings nothing but suffering to our family. Look what happened to your father, to your grandfather." June didn't finish the sentence, her voice faltering. What neither of them knew was that Theodore was watching the scene from afar, dressed in simple clothes and sunglasses. He had spent the morning discreetly following the girl's routine, intrigued by her natural talent. Now, seeing the pain in June's eyes, he was beginning to understand that there was much more to that story than a simple prohibition. The day continued with its normal routine in Harmony Falls. Tourists photographed the historic streets, merchants organized their stores, and the old piano in the square waited silently for the delicate touch of its little pianist. But that day, Lily didn't show up to play. For the first time in months, the square remained silent, while somewhere in the town, a 6-year-old girl cried silently, dreaming of melodies she couldn't play. The next morning, Principal Thompson arrived early at the elementary school, her heels echoing through the empty hallways as she organized the documents for the new music program. At 42, she carried on her face the marks of someone who had dedicated her life to education in a small town. But her eyes still sparkled when thinking about the possibilities that the mysterious donation could bring. A complete music program, with new instruments and qualified teachers, she murmured to herself, still trying to believe it. The anonymous donor had been specific. He wanted the project to start immediately, with priority given to talented children from the community. Thompson knew exactly who her first student would be. Meanwhile, in the simple house on the outskirts of town, Lily helped her grandmother prepare breakfast. The smell of fresh coffee and cornbread filled the kitchen, but the silence between them was heavy since the discussion the day before. "Grandma!" Lily finally broke the silence, her small hands playing nervously with the hem of her school uniform. "You never tell me about Dad. What was he like when he played?" June froze, the coffee cup trembling slightly in her hands. "Richard, your father was like you. He had music in his soul." She took a deep breath, the painful memories returning like waves. "But music changed him, Lily. It consumed him from the inside until there was nothing left of the sweet boy I raised." "Did he leave because of music?" "No, honey. He left because—" June stopped, unable to continue. How to explain to a 6-year-old child that her father had disappeared without a trace, after months of struggling against a condition that gradually prevented him from playing? The sound of knocking on the door interrupted the conversation. It was Thompson, holding a folder full of papers and smiling animatedly. "Mrs. Gable, we need to talk about a wonderful opportunity for Lily." June frowned, but invited the principal in. While the adults talked in the living room, Lily escaped to the backyard, where she had improvised a keyboard on the planks of the old wooden bench. Her fingers moved silently over the worn wood, playing a melody that only she could hear. In the luxurious inn in the historic center, Theodore received an unexpected visit. Sarah, his executive assistant, had arrived unexpectedly from New York, bringing with her a thick folder of documents and a worried expression. 3 weeks, Theodore. You've been in this backwater for 3 weeks, and you're not answering my calls properly," she said, throwing the documents on the table. "The investors are furious. We need to start construction on the resort immediately." Theodore watched the town through the window, his thoughts distant. "Have you ever stopped to listen to the music of this town, Sarah? The sound of the church, her bells, the hubbub of the market, the children playing in the square. Music doesn't pay the bills, Theodore. And speaking of music, I found out about your little project at the elementary school." She pulled a document from the folder. "An anonymous donation for a music program. What are you plotting?" Before he could answer, they heard shouts coming from the street. From the window, they saw a small crowd forming in the central square. In the middle of it, Lily was playing the public piano like never before, her small hands pulling from the instrument, a melody so sad and deep that it made passers-by stop, hypnotized. "That girl," murmured Sarah, watching the scene. "She has a gift," replied Theodore, his voice choked. "Like I had before." "Before building an empire, you mean?" Sarah interrupted him abruptly. "Theodore, wake up! That square, that piano, all of that will give way to the most luxurious resort in the Midwest. You've worked your whole life for this." But Theodore barely heard her. His eyes were fixed on the little pianist, who was now being intercepted by her grandmother. June crossed the crowd, her face a mask of fury and fear, and practically dragged Lily away from the piano. "Never again, Lily! Never again will you play that piano!" June's voice echoed through the square, making the tourists disperse, embarrassed. Theodore felt his heart clench as he saw the tears in the girl's eyes. Without thinking twice, he grabbed his coat and left, ignoring Sarah's calls. He followed June and Lily discreetly to their house, where he witnessed a scene that left him even more intrigued. June, after putting Lily in time out in her room, sat on the porch and took out of an old box a yellowed newspaper clipping. In the faded photo, a young man smiled next to a piano holding a trophy. The headline read, "Young Prodigy from Harmony Falls wins Regional Music Festival." "My Richard," whispered June, stroking the photo. "Why did music have to take you too?" Hidden behind a tree, Theodore felt his blood run cold. He knew that photo, that festival. He was there that day so long ago when his own life had taken a different turn. But before he could process this revelation, his cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Sarah. "Eviction notices ready. The families in the resort area, including the piano girl's family, will receive notification tomorrow. There's no turning back, Theodore." That night, as the town slept, 2 pianos played in Harmony Falls. In the simple house on the outskirts, Lily silently fingered her imaginary keyboard, tears running down her face. And in the luxurious inn, for the first time in decades, Theodore sat at the grand piano in the main hall and played, letting his own tears fall on the ivory keys. The same melody, in 2 different places, connecting past and present in a symphony of secrets about to be revealed. The eviction notice arrived on a Thursday morning, along with the dew that covered the flowers in June's small garden. The bailiff, embarrassed, handed over the envelope, while Lily watched hidden behind the kitchen door. June, with trembling hands, read the document once, twice, 3 times, as if she could change its contents with the force of denial alone. 30 days, she murmured, letting herself fall into the kitchen chair. 30 days to leave the house where I raised my son, where I'm raising my granddaughter." Lily approached silently, her big eyes full of worry. "Grandma, what happened?" Before June could answer, a strong dizziness overcame her. Her body, already tired from years of hard work, finally succumbed to the weight of her worries. Lily, frightened, ran to the street, screaming for help. It was Thompson who arrived first, after hearing the girl's cries while passing by on her way to school. The principal immediately called an ambulance, but in the agonizing minutes of waiting, an unexpected figure appeared at the door. Theodore, still disguised in his simple clothes and sunglasses. "I can help," he said, approaching quickly. "My car is nearby. We can take her to the hospital right now." Thompson, with no time to question, accepted the help. As they rushed to the hospital, Lily held her grandmother's hand in the back seat, singing softly a gentle melody, as if music could ward off all evil. At the hospital, while June received initial treatment, Thompson watched Theodore with growing curiosity. There was something familiar about that man, something she couldn't completely identify. "Why are you helping?" she asked finally, when they were alone in the waiting room. Theodore removed his sunglasses, revealing tired but kind eyes. "Sometimes we need to fix the mistakes we've made, even if it seems too late." At that moment, Sarah burst through the hospital corridor, her high heels echoing dramatically. "Theodore, I finally found you. The investors are—" She stopped abruptly when she saw Thompson. "Theodore?" Thompson repeated, her face paling. "Theodore Bancroft, the man who is buying half the town to build a resort?" The silence that followed was deafening. Theodore tried to explain, but Thompson was already walking away, disappointment evident in her face. How could I have been so naive? The music program, the donations, was it all part of your plan? "It's not what you're thinking," Theodore tried to explain, but was interrupted by the doctor's arrival. "Mrs. Gable is stable," he informed them, "but she will need to stay in the hospital for a few days. The stress and high blood pressure caused a mild heart attack." Lily, who had overheard everything hidden behind a pillar, ran out of the hospital. Her small feet took her instinctively to Harmony Square, to the old public piano that brought her so much comfort. But when she arrived, she found only an empty space. The piano had been removed. "Looking for this?" A familiar voice sounded behind her. It was Sarah, holding a photograph of the piano being loaded by city employees. "It was removed this morning. Order of the construction company. You know, the one from the man who was pretending to be your friend." Tears began to run down Lily's face, but something different shone in her eyes. It wasn't just sadness, it was determination. Without saying a word, the girl walked to the site where the resort would be built and sat in the middle of the street, beginning to sing. Her voice, small but firm, attracted the attention of passers-by. Soon, a small crowd formed. Someone brought a guitar, another brought a tambourine. Lily's music, which spoke of longing and hope, began to echo through the historic streets of Harmony Falls. Theodore, who had followed the girl, watched the scene. From afar, his heart divided between the empire he had built and the music he had abandoned. It was then that he noticed something strange in the way Lily played, or rather, pretended to play, in the air. Her fingers moved exactly as his had moved 40 years ago, when he played a specific composition. "It can't be," he murmured. Approaching slowly, the melody that Lily sang was the same that he had presented at that festival so long ago. The same music that he had stolen from his mentor, the pianist Hannibal Keyes. The music that had marked the beginning of his disgrace and the end of his musical dreams. At that moment, Thompson appeared running. "Lily, your grandma woke up. She's asking for you." And she stopped when she saw the crowd gathered, the music, the spontaneous demonstration that was forming. "This won't stop the project," declared Sarah, who was also watching the scene. "We already have all the permits. Construction begins next week." But something had changed in Theodore's gaze. He approached Lily, knelt beside her, and for the first time began to sing along with her. His deep voice mingled with the girl's childish voice, creating a harmony that made everyone present shiver. "This music," he said when they finished, "where did you learn it?" "I didn't learn it," Lily replied, wiping away her tears. "It's always been in here." She pointed to her heart. "Grandma says it's the music that Dad played before he left." Theodore felt the world spin. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together in a way he could never have imagined. The composition of Hannibal Keyes, the disappearance of Richard, the natural talent of Lily, everything was connected by an invisible thread of music and destiny. But before he could fully process this revelation, a scream cut through the air. It was June, who had fled the hospital upon hearing of the demonstration. She staggered to her granddaughter, her face pale and sweaty. "Lily, stop this now. You can't." Her words were interrupted when she fainted again, falling into Theodore's arms. The sun set in Harmony Falls, painting the sky in orange tones as an ambulance cut through the silence of the historic streets for the second time that day. And in the midst of the confusion, a little girl held her grandmother's hand, singing softly a melody that carried more secrets than anyone could imagine. The hospital of Harmony Falls had never been as busy as it was that night. In the white and silent corridors, Lily sat in a chair too big for her small size, her legs swinging without reaching the floor. Beside her, Thompson tried to distract her with stories from school, but the girl's eyes didn't leave the door of the room where her grandmother was hospitalized. "Why isn't she waking up, Aunt Thompson?" Lily asked for the third time that hour, her small voice laden with worry. Before Thompson could answer, Theodore appeared in the hallway carrying a mysterious box. He had just returned from his inn, where he spent hours rummaging through old memories stored in a suitcase he never opened. "Lily," he called softly, "can I show you something?" The girl hesitated, looking at Thompson for approval. The principal, still hurt by the discovery of Theodore's true identity, nodded reluctantly. Theodore opened the box carefully, revealing old photographs and yellowed newspaper clippings. "I knew your grandfather," he said, showing a photo where two smiling young men posed next to a piano. "Hannibal Keyes was my music teacher." Lily's eyes widened as she recognized the older man in the photo. It was the same one that appeared in the picture frame that her grandmother kept in the dresser drawer, the one she only looked at when she thought no one was watching. "Grandma said Grandpa Hannibal was a great musician," Lily whispered, touching the photograph with reverence. "He was more than that," continued Theodore, his voice choked with emotion. "He was a misunderstood genius. He composed music that seemed to come from another world, but he never wanted fame or recognition. He said that true music didn't need applause." At that moment, a nurse came out of June's room. "She's awake and wants to see her granddaughter," she announced. Inside the room, June was sitting on the bed, looking smaller and more fragile than usual. When she saw Lily, she gave a tired smile and held out her arms. The girl ran into her embrace, burying her face in her grandmother's lap. "Grandma, please don't be sick," Lily pleaded, her voice muffled by the fabric of the hospital gown. June caressed her granddaughter's curls, but her eyes focused on the box that Theodore was still holding. "That box?" she murmured, paling. "Where did you get that?" Theodore approached slowly, placing the box on the bedside table. "Mrs. Gable, we need to talk. About Hannibal, about Richard, about the music that connects us all." "No," June tried to get up but was restrained by weakness. "I don't want to talk about it. I don't want Lily to know." "But she needs to know," interrupted a voice from the door. It was Sarah who entered the room carrying an old folder. "Theodore, I found the documents you asked for, the truth about the 1985 music festival." The room fell silent as Sarah opened the folder. "The composition you presented at that festival," she said, looking at Theodore, "wasn't yours. It was Hannibal Keyes. You were disqualified when they found out." June gave a gasp of surprise. "So that's why Dad stopped teaching, because of you." Theodore lowered his head, the shame of decades weighing on his shoulders. "Yes, I was desperate. My mother was sick, needing expensive treatment. I thought that if I won the festival, I could get the money to save her, but when they discovered the plagiarism, Hannibal took the blame. He said he had given me permission to use the music. He lost his reputation, his job, and abandoned. Music forever," completed June, tears running down her face. "My father never played again after that day, and Richard, my son." "What happened to Dad?" asked Lily, her small voice cutting through the tension of the room. June closed her eyes, as if the memory was too painful. Richard was like you, honey. He had music in his blood, but one day his hands started to shake. At first they were small tremors, almost imperceptible. Then, Huntington's disease, Theodore interfered, surprising everyone. The same condition that affected Hannibal, a hereditary neurological disease that causes progressive loss of muscle control. Thompson, who had remained silent until then, approached the bed. Is that why Richard disappeared? Because of the disease? He didn't want anyone to see him like that, replied June, her voice breaking. A musician who could no longer play. He left one night and never came back. He left only a note saying that he loved us, but that he couldn't continue being a burden. Lily, who had listened to everything in silence, suddenly stood up. She walked to the hospital window where the full moon illuminated the historic town. Her small fingers began to move in the air, playing an invisible melody. "It's Grandpa's music," she said without turning around. "The one that Mr. Theodore used at the festival. The one that Dad played before he left. It's always been in here, inside me, even without me ever having heard it." Theodore approached the girl, kneeling beside her. "Lily, you are living proof that music is stronger than any disease, any mistake, any regret, and I promise that I will fix my mistakes." At that moment, Sarah entered the room again, her normally impassive face showing signs of worry. "Theodore, the investors are here. They arrived from New York now. They want a definitive answer about the resort." The room fell silent again. All attention turned to Theodore. He looked at Lily, at June, at the old photographs scattered on the bed. 40 years of regrets and wrong decisions weighed on his shoulders. "Tell them I have a different proposal," he replied finally, his voice firm. "But first, I need to find someone. I need to find Richard." Theodore's words hung in the air like notes of an unfinished song as the sun began to rise in Harmony Falls, promising a new day and perhaps a chance for redemption. In the days that followed June's hospitalization, Harmony Falls underwent a silent transformation. The old public piano reappeared in the square, completely restored, shining under the morning sun. Theodore had cancelled his stay at the luxurious inn and moved to a simple house in the historic center, from where he coordinated a tireless search for Richard. Lily, divided between visits to the hospital and her regular classes, found solace in the keys of the restored piano. Her improvised performances now attracted not only tourists, but also local residents who began to see in that little pianist a symbol of resistance. "Her music is different," commented Thompson to Theodore as they watched Lily play one afternoon. "It has more hope." Theodore nodded, noting how the girl's small fingers danced with more confidence on the keys. "She's composing her own story now," he replied, his eyes fixed on a distant point, "like I should have done 40 years ago." The search for Richard had spread to all the neighboring towns. Sarah, surprising everyone, decided to use her business contacts to help. "I'm not doing this for you," she said to Theodore. "I'm doing it for the girl. She reminds me of someone I knew a long time ago, someone who also had her dreams stolen." It was on a rainy afternoon that the first real clue emerged. A street musician in Chicago had recognized Richard's photo. "He used to sit on that bench in the square," he informed, pointing to a place near the cathedral. "He didn't play, he just watched other musicians. His hands trembled a lot." Theodore and Sarah left immediately for Chicago. At the hospital, June recovered slowly, her strength renewed by the possibility of seeing her son again. Lily spent the nights at her grandmother's side, telling stories about her performances in the square and how people now stopped to listen to her. "Grandma," she said one night while adjusting June's blankets, "do you think Dad will like my songs?" June caressed her granddaughter's face, noticing for the first time how her eyes were identical to Richard's. "Honey, your father will love your songs. Do you know why? Because they come from the same place his came from, the heart." In Chicago, Theodore and Sarah followed leads that took them to different parts of the city. It was in a shelter for homeless people that they found the first concrete information. "Richard," said an elderly lady who worked as a volunteer. "Yes, he was here for a while. An educated man, always helped in the kitchen, but his hands trembled so much. One day he said he needed to leave, that he didn't want to be a burden to anyone." The search continued for a few more days, until one Sunday morning, Sarah received an anonymous call. Someone had seen Richard in a small town 2 hours from Harmony Falls. "He works as a gardener on a farm," informed the voice on the other end of the line. "He doesn't play anymore, but sometimes he hums while taking care of the plants." Theodore wanted to leave immediately, but Sarah stopped him. "No," she said firmly, "this time we need to do it differently. He needs to want to come back." It was then that Thompson had an idea. Using her contacts in the cultural area, she organized a music festival in Harmony Falls, especially dedicated to local composers. The event would be held exactly 40 years after that fateful festival that changed so many lives. "We're going to make sure the news reaches him," she explained. "And we're going to have a special presentation. Lily will play the original composition of Hannibal Keys." The news of the festival spread quickly. Local newspapers published articles about the little pianist who was revolutionizing the music. Scene of Harmony Falls. Photos of Lily playing in the square circulated on the internet, always accompanied by the story of the public piano that was almost removed to make way for a resort. At the hospital, June was discharged, but something had changed in her. Her eyes, before always filled with sadness when the subject was music, now shone when she saw her granddaughter practice. One afternoon, she surprised everyone by sitting next to Lily at the piano in the square. "This music," she said gently. "Touching a key, your grandfather Hannibal composed when Richard was born. He said that each person has their own melody. We just need to learn to hear it." Meanwhile, in a small town in the countryside, a man with trembling hands watched a poster for the music festival. His eyes filled with tears when he saw the photo of the little pianist, recognizing in her the same features he saw in the mirror every day. Back in Harmony Falls, preparations for the festival advanced rapidly. Theodore had completely transformed his plans for the resort. Instead of demolishing the historic area, he decided to restore the old houses and create a cultural center. "We're going to call it the Hannibal Keys Cultural Center," he announced during a meeting with the City Hall, "a space dedicated to preserving and promoting the local music, with a free music school for underprivileged children." Sarah, who watched everything from afar, couldn't hide her surprise at her boss's transformation. "You know," she said to Thompson over coffee, "in 20 years working with Theodore, I've never seen him so alive." The big day of the festival was approaching, and Lily practiced tirelessly. Her small hands no longer trembled when playing the complex notes of her grandfather's composition. But there was something different in her interpretation. She had added her own stamp to the music, transforming the original melancholy into a message of hope. On the eve of the year festival, as the town decorated for the event, a solitary figure arrived in Harmony Square. The man with trembling hands stood before the public piano, his eyes fixed on the keys that were once his life. Slowly, he extended his trembling fingers over the keyboard but didn't touch it. "That's the hardest part of the song," said a child's voice behind him. It was Lily, returning from another day of practice, "but Mr. Bancroft taught me a trick to not miss the notes." Richard turned slowly, meeting his daughter's eyes for the first time. Time seemed to freeze in that moment as father and daughter recognized each other through the music that ran in their veins. "Want me to show you how it's done?" asked Lily, her voice overflowing with an innocence that made Richard's heart clench. He opened his mouth to answer, but at that moment, a familiar sound cut through the air of the square. It was June, who was walking quickly towards them, her eyes fixed on the man who had left so long ago. The air of Harmony Falls was charged with emotion when June stopped a few steps from Richard. Her eyes, full of contained tears, studied every detail of the face of the son she hadn't seen for so many years. His hands trembled more than usual now, but his eyes maintained the same intense glow they always had when he sat at the piano. "Mom," whispered Richard, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Forgive me." June didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked slowly to him and, with the delicacy of someone touching a rare piece of porcelain, held his trembling hands between hers. "There's nothing to forgive, my son. You were never a burden. Never." Lily watched the scene with wide eyes, her small heart beating fast. It was her father, the one she had heard so much about, the one whose music she carried in her blood without ever having met him. "The music you were playing," said Richard, turning to Lily. "How do you know it?" "It's always been in here," replied the girl, placing her hand over her heart. "Grandma says it's the music that Grandpa Hannibal made when you were born." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Theodore, who was accompanied by Sarah and Thompson. Upon seeing Richard, Theodore stopped abruptly, the weight of 40 years of guilt visible on his shoulders. "Richard," he began, his voice choked. I know who you are," interrupted Richard. "I saw your photo in the newspapers talking about the resort you're going to build here. Are you going to destroy our history to build your empire?" "No," replied Theodore firmly. "I came to fix my mistakes, all of them, starting with the lie I told at that festival, the music I stole from your grandfather." A small group of people began to form around them, attracted by the intensity of the moment. Sarah, realizing the historical importance of that meeting, made a discreet signal for some musicians who were rehearsing for the festival to approach. "Richard," continued Theodore, "your daughter has an extraordinary gift. She plays Hannibal's music as if she was born knowing it, and tomorrow at the festival she will present the original composition, giving your grandfather the recognition he always deserved." "Festival?" asked Richard, confused. "Yes," exclaimed Lily, taking her father's trembling hand. "Come see, Dad. I learned to play it my way. Even when the notes are sad, I make them happy." At that moment, something extraordinary happened. The musicians who approached began to play softly the melody that Lily had practiced so much. The girl, without letting go of her father's hand, led him to the piano. "Let's play together," she said, her eyes shining with hope. "You can sing and I'll play. The hands don't need to be still to make music." Richard looked at his trembling hands, then at his daughter, and finally at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. Slowly, he began to hum the melody, his voice initially hesitant, gaining strength with each note. Lily accompanied him on the piano, her small fingers dancing over the keys with confidence. The musicians around joined the improvised performance, adding layers of harmony to Hannibal's composition. The entire square stopped to watch. Theodore, in silence, watched how music had the power to heal wounds that money could never touch. Thompson, beside him, held his hand discreetly, a gesture of forgiveness and understanding. The next day, the Harmony Falls Music Festival began with a surprise. In place of the announced resort, Theodore revealed the plans for the Hannibal Keys Cultural Center, a space dedicated to preserving and promoting local music. "This center," he announced, "during the opening ceremony, will be directed by someone who deeply understands the transformative power of music." Richard Keys, despite his physical limitations, never lost his musical essence. He will be our artistic director, working alongside his daughter Lily, who at 6 years old taught us that music goes far beyond the keys of a piano. Lily's performance was the most emotional moment of the festival. On the main stage, the little pianist played her grandfather's composition while her father beside her sang. His hands may have trembled, but his voice maintained the same power as years ago. June, sitting in the front row between Theodore and Thompson, cried silently. They weren't tears of sadness, but of gratitude for seeing her family finally reunited. Through the music, she once tried to silence. Months passed, and Harmony Falls flourished in a way that no one expected. The cultural center became the beating heart of the town, attracting musical talents from all over the region. Richard, although he could no longer play, discovered a new vocation teaching music theory and composition. Theodore decided to take up residence in the town, buying a simple house near the square. His relationship with Thompson grew naturally, based on a mutual understanding of the power of redemption. Sarah, surprising everyone, resigned from her executive position to help in the administration of the cultural center. Sometimes, she said, we need to lose everything we've built to find what really matters. On a particularly beautiful afternoon, Lily sat at the piano in the square for another of her spontaneous performances. Beside her, her father hummed softly, his trembling hands marking the rhythm in the air. June, a few steps behind, smiled as she saw how her granddaughter had transformed sadness into hope. The music they played was no longer just Hannibal's composition. It was a new melody which mixed the past and the present, the pain and the joy, the error and the forgiveness. It was the music of a family that, after so many years of silence, finally found its harmony. "Grandma," called Lily after finishing playing, "now I understand what Grandpa Hannibal said about each person having their own melody. Ours is this, isn't it? A song that even when it starts sad, ends happy." June hugged her granddaughter while watching Theodore and Thompson approaching hand in hand, and Sarah organizing the sheet music of the students of the cultural center. "Yes, honey," she replied, "our music is like life. Sometimes it's out of tune, sometimes it loses the rhythm, but in the end, when everyone plays together, it forms the most beautiful melody that exists." The sun set in Harmony Falls, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange. In the central square, the old public piano remained there, a silent witness of how a little 6-year-old pianist had taught an entire town that true music doesn't come from the hands, but from the heart, and that there is no melody as beautiful as the one that is born from love, forgiveness, and the courage to start over.